I'm Janet, and I'm one of the co-facilitators. I'd like to welcome you here. So today I'm joined by Gabriel Eichsteller from FEMPRA, who is going to be presenting a bit later on, and Darren Bishton from the Benchmarking Forum, who's going to be leading the discussions, and hopefully we'll also be joined by a colleague of Gabriel's called Makeda Winkler, who's from the Islington House Project. And this is webinar 3 in a series of webinars we're doing. There's 8 of them. And the focus of today is supporting interdependence, and we're going to be talking about the relational universe model in order to do that. The background to the webinars is a series of sessions that we did jointly between the ESME, Fairburn Leaving Care Learning Programme. So that's a programme of organisations who are funded in the voluntary sector to support young people with care experience, and the National Leaving Care Benchmarking Forum, which supports local authorities and especially leaving care teams. So we had a programme which we ran jointly last year, where we were all looking at different aspects of relational practice focused on care experience young people. So that might have been helping young people themselves to build relationships with each other, so care experienced parents or those with insecure migration status, or it might have been about the relationships that we as professionals have with each other in order to support young people better. And this program generated lots of learning, some case studies, some resources and links, and we thought that we should share that case studies and those links more widely. But we thought that it wasn't a very relational way just to put them on the website and give you a link. So these webinars are a more relational way to introduce you to some resources about relational practice. So we will put a link in the chat to where all the resources are on the website, so you can follow those up, and they are great. But this is just a little introduction. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Gabriel to talk about interdependence and the relational universe.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, welcome everyone. It's great to see you all here. And today we want to explore why should we actually focus on interdependence when we support care experienced young people, or when we support anybody for that matter. So interdependence is important because it recognizes that as human beings, we're inherently interdependent and interconnected. So it's actually not a deficit that we're reliant on other people, but it's part of human nature that we are connected to other people. And so supporting all relationships that matter to young people, that foster a sense of belonging and inclusion, is really important in relational practice. We would argue that we don't just focus on the one-to-one relationship between us and the person we might support, but actually that we support all of the relationships that matter to that person. And by cultivating that network of meaningful relationships, we can help provide stability, we can help provide connection, support, and particularly at critical transition times when somebody might have to start college or start a job or move into a new home or whatever it might be, at those critical transition times, that network of meaningful relationships is really important to people. So we want to introduce you to a model called the Relational Universe, which kind of gives us a visual understanding of how we can support relational practice and how we can support interdependence. It's basically using that metaphor of the universe to help us conceptualize the different kinds of relationships that are part of somebody's life, and to recognize that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's not just about each individual relationship and what that might mean, but actually it's about the interplay between all of them, the way they kind of move, the dynamics that are happening in somebody's relational universe. So it gives us a way of looking at relationships that surround an individual. And it gives us that focus on their interdependence, on recognizing that we're all part of other people's relational universe, just as the other people are part of our relational universe. Whereabouts they might be in the relational universe will vary. So some people might be close or distant. Some people's presence might have a strong gravitational pull on us, or less so. They may be looming large, these planets, or play a smaller role, perhaps like distant stars guiding us. And importantly, that relational universe gives us an opportunity to kind of ask curious questions to find out, what do these relationships mean to the individual? To what extent might they be toxic or problematic or traumatic or positive, uplifting? What are those dynamics? How strong is that gravitational pull of another planet, if you like, on us? And so once we better understand the relational universe, we can then look at how we can support an individual to develop and maintain those relationships that matter to them, or to recognize perhaps where a relationship doesn't bring out the best in them, where a relationship might just be too difficult, or perhaps is too exploitative. And once they can recognize that, they might be able to let that go and draw on other relationships to support them. So it gives us an opportunity to be really solution focused, to look towards what can be different, rather than looking back at the past and looking at what has been and that we can't really change anymore now. But it gives us that time in the here and now to think about what we can change. So to give you an example, I want to introduce you to a young person called Layla, who's 14 and doesn't have much in terms of family. So there's a couple of planets there, kaleidoscopic whirlwind for mom, and an auntie and maternal grandparents, and her little brother who's close to her. Her peer group consists of her best friend and a group of girls who bully her quite a lot, both at school and outside, and she both hates them and at the same time wants to be part of their group. And I think that shows something about relationships as well, in that they're not always straightforward. They can be messy, they can be contradictory in many ways as well. They can evoke a whole range of different emotions and meet a whole range of different needs. Within the community, Layla has limited relationships, but there are some people that she's connected to. At school, there are a few staff who are important to her, like a teaching assistant, Senko, arts teacher, and then within the community, there are a few relationships, like the shopkeeper, the hairdresser, that have kind of more of an everyday presence in her life. Okay, the shopkeeper, maybe, the hairdresser, not so much. But they are little relationships that make her life worthwhile in some way, that give her a sense of connection to the people in her community. Now, Layla has just recently been placed in a children's home, so there's a whole bunch of planets that have just popped up in her relational universe, and are starting to kind of make it feel rather crowded, potentially. And as a child looked after, there are a whole range of other people who've been placed in her universe because of that. And yeah, so all of a sudden, her universe is full of professionals. So if we just pause for a moment and reflect, then we can see that a lot of planets aren't just there because she's in care. And it's not quite sure whether they create a sense of elegant equilibrium, or whether they make her universe kind of feel topsy-turvy and out of whack. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that we don't actually see. We don't understand the dynamics just by looking at those relationships, right? We don't know how Layla feels about any of those relationships. But hopefully by introducing the metaphor, we can kind of find out how she might feel about them, how she thinks and understands those different relationships. And we can help her recognize maybe some of those relationships that might be important to her and how we can nurture and support them. So if we take a step forward, look at Layla's relational universe a couple of years later when she has left the children's homes. It looks very different. So a lot of the support, a lot of the planets that were there are no longer there. In fact, maybe her relational universe feels a fair bit emptier now. And so we can think about who's left in her relational universe and what happened to the relationships that she had. Why did they all go away? Did they all have to go away? She does have a few new relationships as well now that she's a care leaver. And some of the influence might have gone away, at least some of the day-to-day influence with that group of girls that was bullying her, but the impact of that hasn't entirely drifted off. So not all of the relationships that we might have will just disappear simply because we might have moved on with our life, or their power might not simply disappear. Importantly, there's a new person in there as well, an older boyfriend who has come. And for Layla, that looks a bit like a shooting star that makes her wishes come true. Finally, that relationship that she's hoped for. Whereas perhaps for us as professionals, knowing a little bit more about that boyfriend's case file, we might see that as an asteroid that's about to hit. So in many ways, that metaphor of the relational universe gives us an opportunity to kind of, explore different perspectives on that and help people understand how we might see these relationships, but also for us to understand what's important to them, what need do those relationships mean. And of course, we can also then think about like what might need to be in place if what kind of relationships might enrich Layla's life if we were to support her, if something was going to happen, like she was going to become pregnant, for instance, what might be some of the relationships that could help her through that as well. So I want to just hand over to Makeda Winkler from the Islington House Project, who has joined us, and she and her colleague are using the relational universe quite a bit. So Makeda, can I bring you in there?
My name is Makeda Winkler, and I'm the team lead for the House Project in Islington, which is in North London. The House Project is a nationwide charity, and there are, I can't remember how many local house projects there are now, but we're ever expanding, which is brilliant because it's a service I think every local authority should have. But we split ourselves between the National House Project and Islington Council in our case, and we sit under the Leaving Care Service, but we're very, very different and very niche, I would say, in that we work with sets of 10 young people twice a year. So we run 2 cohorts every year. And the program is set up in, I would call it 2 or 3 kind of phases. So the first phase would be where young people work directly with us. So we meet up with young people every fortnight in our case, and we carry out workshops, group workshops, and we go through all of the different aspects of what young people will need to live independently in a safe and thriving way. So we do sessions like healthy relationships, money management and budgeting, being a good tenant, the list goes on. So that's the first phase. And then once that phase comes to an end, probably within about 6 to 8 months, those sessions will last for. After that period, then we go to housing. We depend heavily on housing, the housing team within Islington, and let them know that this group of young people are now ready to be allocated with 1-bedroom council properties. So once these properties become available, we allocate them to our young people, and that would kind of allow us to then move on to the third phase, which is where we support young people through to the point of them becoming a secure tenant. So over the first year of their tenancy, we continue to support young people with setting up their bills, managing their universal credit, looking for work, just we support them in a really holistic way. So even in terms of their mental health, if there's any help that or support that they need with that, we're kind of there as an extra layer of support for them throughout that first year. We work really closely with their networks, their social workers, any mental health workers that they have. And yeah, we just kind of really try to offer an overarching type of support for them. We try and include like really fun activities, go-karting, ice skating. We try and do like an annual walking trip to places like the Lake District. We really just try to enrich their experience and their journey and make that transition from the leaving care service onto independence, like one that feels fun and safe, because it often doesn't for our care experienced young people. So we just try to make them feel held and supported and understood. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's what the House Project is and does. I guess the whys of how we use the relational universe is, I guess, to give us a better understanding of the young person's support network and the people around them who they're able to lean on in order to kind of feel held and feel supported in their journey through the kind of care system and through the leaving care service, because it can be a really, really lonely place, or it can feel like a really lonely place. So I guess giving young people and ourselves a better understanding of what the young person's universe looks like can kind of help us to put things in perspective, because sometimes it can feel really lonely, but it's not until you kind of point things out to young people that they realize the people and the resources that they can actually depend on. So for me, that's one of the biggest whys, for the young people to feel that they have others around them. But I think it's also important for us as professionals to feel that we also have a network in supporting this young person, so that it doesn't feel like we're holding the kind of the lion's share of the burden, because sometimes it can get really heavy working with young people with like really intense traumas. It can feel like a lot, and it can take its toll on us as professionals. So working as part of a network, as part of a relational universe, for the want of a better phrase, I think it eases things up for us. It makes it feel a lot less stressful, and it allows us also to be able to share ideas, share tools, ways of working, so that we can make sure that the young person's being supported as best as possible. So those would be the main kind of whys for me or for us in Islington. And then in terms of the hows, we use it in like in various different ways. I think the main or the first initial thing that pops to mind are our trauma formulation meetings. So when we first start working with our young people, this is kind of at the application stage or just after the application stage. Once they've joined the House Project, we arrange these meetings with the professional network around the young person. So this will include like social workers, mentors, foster carers, anybody who has kind of that direct line of support with the young person. And we go through and speak about the young person's journey into care, what their kind of adverse childhood experiences might have been, just anything that would have had a direct and really significant impact on them, and how this has played out in terms of behaviours that they might be displaying now. And all of the professionals kind of get a chance to give their views on where the young person is now, and how their traumas have impacted them. So it kind of really pulls on that relational universe and all of the people who are there to support the young person, and helps us to kind of get a really strong understanding of the things that could kind of bubble to the surface during our time working with the young person, because all types of things kind of come up and out at different times, different points throughout the young person's journey. And so doing these trauma formulation meetings kind of makes us feel more equipped and prepared for the things that might kind of come out during our time working with and supporting the young people. So yeah, it kind of allows us to touch base, make contact with, network with those who are within the young person's universe, so that, you know, if there's a specialist type of support that might be needed in terms of the young person's mental health, or in terms of youth justice, then we know who we can contact, and how their experience and advice might be helpful. So that's one of the ways that I feel the relational universe is used. But also in our safety planning with the young person, and our direct work with the young person, we also draw on the relational universe. Firstly, with the safety planning. So this is kind of a document or tool that we use when young people are coming closer to moving on into their own property. And it gives us the chance to kind of talk through with the young person kind of how best they know to keep themselves safe once they're in their own home. So it talks about the actual home, the physical home, how they stay safe, but it also talks about their own mental and emotional well-being and the people around them that they can lean on. So it kind of asks questions about who the young person would turn to in an emergency, you know, who they would be given a spare set of keys to. Do they know how to contact these people? Are there any people in kind of their network who they perhaps wouldn't want us to share any information about them with? Because as important as it is for young people and for us to be aware of those who are closest to the young person, it's also really important for us to get an understanding of those who I guess aren't so close, or might be harmful, relationships that might be harmful for the young person. And so it kind of it lends a space for the young person to kind of reflect at a really pivotal time in their journey. It kind of allows them to think, okay, yes, these are the people who I know are there for me, and these are the people or the relationships that I need to stay away from. And it opens up a really kind of fruitful conversation, really, about kind of what is healthy in a relationship and kind of what's unhealthy. And I guess it reminds me of the gravitational pulls of some of those planets that we discussed before, right? Like some of the planets are bigger, have a strong gravitational pull, and some are smaller and have a weaker pull. And like sometimes what I've realized is that those planets with the strongest gravitational pulls can be both positive and negative. I've had young people who have had some terrible peer pressure and influence, but those are the planets that are biggest in their lives at that given time. And I think that speaks to their understanding of what a relationship is. Sometimes to us, it might not always seem healthy, but to them, that's their norms. So doing this safety plan with the young people gives us a chance to kind of help them to reflect, and helps us to give them some advice and guidance on what is healthy and what isn't. And sometimes you can really see the penny dropping, you know, when they think, okay, like this person to me might seem the closest and most important person, but is this relationship the best? You know, it gives us the chance to kind of drop those pearls of wisdom through to them. So I find that that's been really helpful. But also in terms of direct work, in the past, what I've tried to do is, I guess you could call it mapping with the young person, where I kind of get a piece of paper and just put the young person at the center. like I'd literally write their name in the center and then draw like a ring around their name. And that ring that was closest to them would represent all of the relationships that are most important to them, that they find to be the most helpful and loving and caring relationships. And I'd put kind of mum, Aunt Sue, or whoever it might be, literally write their names too. And then I draw another ring around that circle. And these might be relationships that the young person feels indifferent about. Like it wouldn't be that much of a loss if this person was no longer their friend, or if they didn't have contact with them. And then I draw another circle, and that outer circle would kind of represent the people in their lives who they want to stay away from them, or they see as being hurtful or harmful to their journey. And by the end of this kind of direct work session, the young person has kind of a physical representation of their relational universe and who the most important people are to them. And it kind of, again, opens up a space for us to have a conversation about this. Like, what is it about the people who are closest to you that you value the most? And what is it about the people who are on the outermost circle that makes it so that you don't want these relationships to evolve or to grow, or these are relationships or people that you want to stay away from you? So again, it gives them a really good understanding of healthy and unhealthy relationships, and allows them to understand how dynamic their relational universes can be. Like sometimes there might be somebody on that middle circle who, for whatever reason, might end up being on the innermost circle. It might be a friendship that's developed, or an aunt or a parent that has now kind of really shown willing to change in a positive way and kind of draws closer. So yeah, I think it's important for young people to really understand that, it's nothing set in stone in terms of their relational universe. Things can change and shift. They can change and shift, which it's likely that they do. We're dealing with young people who are 17 and upwards, and so much changes if we reflect back to when we were their age, and where we are now. So much has changed, and I think it's about encouraging young people to understand that they're growing and evolving all of the time, really. So I would say, yeah, those are the main tools that we use when thinking about the relational universe for our young people.
So we want to give you an opportunity to sort of explore some of the questions about supporting interdependence. So Darren, over to you.
Right, Gabriel, thanks very much. Yeah. Can I just add as well that I think we've used this, or we've heard local authorities use it as a one-off event sometimes, but also then maybe 6 months or 12 months afterwards. And it's been really interesting to see how relationships should change and develop, so there can be a model around that. And what was also interesting in our work was about the difference between comets and asteroids, wasn't it? And our view about what an asteroid might be, maybe a destructive element, but also a comet, which the young person might see as a bright light in the sky and stuff. So it's beautiful, that. I was really interested in just quickly looking at Dan's comment about spaceships and bringing supplies in and stuff like that. And that's very much about what we'd like you to think about doing now. So we're going to go into groups now, probably for around about just under maybe 10 minutes or so. We've got 2 questions for you. What are you doing to support interdependence? And how might you use the relational universe in your work? Hi everybody, welcome back. That was probably a very quick 10 minutes, I know, on 2 really important questions, but hopefully you had some really interesting discussions. It'd be great if we could to get some little bit of feedback. If you could use the chat function and say yes, just want to share just a few little golden asteroid nuggets for us, just to sort of share respond to those questions, that would be brilliant. So please go into the chat if you'd like to say yes, that would be great. Then we can share. We've only got a few minutes really to do this, so it's not long. We just wanted to make sure that you've had those conversations and that you've been able to have a chat, and then essentially, you can share some of these sort of experiences that you've had. And we're really pleased with Dan, who put in the chat function earlier on a little bit about how he's used spaceships and asteroid belts and stuff like that. So yeah, please, would everyone like to say, if they'd like to do quick little feedback? Don't be shy, guys. Come on, it's okay. We're all friends. Oh, Danny, go for it. Well done, Danny. Danny Cliff, go for it.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of say how eye-opening it was, because in my role specifically, I probably don't spend enough time with enough young people, because I'm a housing worker and my job is to prevent homelessness. And so PAs are the ones who spend the majority of the time getting to know young people over a really long period. And I was in the breakout room with some really interesting and diversified roles. And everybody was speaking about how they use that relational interdependence and what it looks like from their professional perspective. And it made me really think about how a young person might see the person that's supporting them in that professional role, and how that relationship is really important to them. And then it occurred to me that in terms of maybe the other side, while we do offer the support and the care, and we build rapport and a real strong relational bond with these young people in a professional capacity, that's what it is. So when we look at the relational universe for somebody who thinks of you as a real core aspect of that relational interdependence, from the other side, as a professional, that is still very much a work-based capacity. And if the professional was to ever draw their relational universe, how likely would it actually be that that young person might be in it? And that was just some real thoughts that I brought away from that breakout group. I listened very intently to everybody, and everybody had a really valuable point to say. And yeah, I learned a lot.
Cheers, Danny. That's great. Thanks for that. And thanks for being so responsive, actually, to the call. I know we're running out of time, Janet. We go, okay, just for see if Dan would like to come in just for 1 minute. Dan, are you there? Dan Nestor.
Yeah, sure. I'll try and be quick with it. One point that stuck out for me was we was talking about the kind of journey of the created piece of work. So say if we do it on one session and we make this thing, and if we're going to keep it for future sessions, how would we do that? We'd said, if we took a picture of it and then brought that to the next session, would that sort of change the way they view it, or would they, if let's reflect on our relational universe, here's what we did last time, would they try, there's potential someone might try and just make a copy of that, thinking, well, that's how it looked last time, so this is how it should look now? Or would we do it fresh to see what it looks like now compared to whenever we last might have done it? So it was just, yeah, part of our conversation was around that kind of, I suppose, practicalities of it in terms of it going across several sessions, I suppose.
Yeah, good point. Good practice point there. Yeah, really important. And maybe using a whole range of sort of different facilities. Maybe you can photograph it, store it. You can sometimes on certainly looked after systems, they can be stored as well. So that might be really quite useful and stuff. Dan, thanks very much, Danny. Thank you again for feeding back. Janet, over to you.
That leads very nicely into the last thing that we're going to do, which is just have a minute for us each just to think about what action am I going to take as a result of today's session. So if you want to post what you're going to do in the chat, that's great, but this is really for you. What action are you going to take? You're going to think about how you might use it in your own practice. Are you thinking about whether there's a colleague you might talk to? Are you going to go online and look for a bit more information? And then how are you going to make sure you do it? Are you going to put a calendar entry? Because we all know, don't we, that we come away from these sessions thinking, oh, I'm definitely going to do that. And then there's a whole pile of emails landing or whatever. So you're going to get a bright pink Post-it note and stick it on your computer. We'll just have a minute just for you to think about what action you might take as a result of this session. Lovely, thank you. So thank you all for joining. Thank you, Makeda, for sharing your experience. If you have examples of where you've used this approach, please do send them to Gabriel, and we can share them round. And please do come to the next session, which is on the 3rd of December, where we'll be using. We'll be looking at another social pedagogy model called the 3 Ps, which helps us to be authentic in our work lives and use both professional, personal and private aspects of our life to support the young people that we're working with. Sign up for the others. The link is there. I could be in the links we send round afterwards. And thank you very much for joining us, and see you at future sessions.